Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Discussions between the school and just the administration about what can we do to make the crossing area there more safer for children. And now that we've taken the building away, it's changed some of the site conditions and sight lines. So in talking with the school, they agreed to buy 2 of these solar rapid flashing beacon type of crossings, the ones that you'll see. So I'll send around a copy of them just so the board can see what's been ordered. So they have been ordered by the school board and they're going to pay for them, and we will go ahead and install them. And so hopefully that improvement there, which is, these are fairly dynamic systems, right? When someone pushes that button.
Is this just one copy for us to look at?
This is one copy. It just
Okay.
shows the.
You just need one sheet.
That's just all the specs in case anybody was interested. It's just the specs that go with the order. So they've been ordered from TAPCO. We're waiting for delivery on those. As soon as they get here, like I said, we've agreed on our side to put them in. So there'll be a touch plate type of arrangement. So if somebody wants to cross, and they're pretty high visibility. So when somebody's there, and I'm sure you guys have seen other places, right? The type that do that. It's a really
Intense flash.
intense, I guess that's a good description of it. It catches your attention. Plus it has additional signage, plus it has an additional sort of little spotlight feature. And it also has the capability of being battery charged with the solar panels. So I'm hoping that, and we only bought it for the one intersection. So I think we'll probably do it for the northern corner, which is on the School Street side where the kids are getting out. So the middle school kids can cross over, elementary kids can cross over at that one location. So I have not gotten a delivery date yet, but once they are here, I'll inform the board, let you know, and then we'll go out and try to get these installed and hopefully see some improvement there, just in terms of visibility for drivers, safety for pedestrians, and hopefully maybe help modify some of the behavior. I know that intersection is creating a lot of discussion and concern, and I'm hoping that maybe this is another safety feature that might help at least modify some of those concerns. Obviously, it doesn't eliminate bad drivers and bad behavior, but it certainly helps call people's attention to pedestrians and school zone and all the things that you should be paying attention to when you drive through that intersection. So that is on the way. And like I said, as soon as we have the actual deliveries, I'll let you know when we're planning on getting it up and installed and actually having it operate.
Anything further?
Nope, that was it.
So we're just passing those around. You want it back? Or
Sure. Yeah, I'll just keep it with the order.
leave them on the desk?
School,
You
I'll
want
grab
to pass it back just in case
Yeah.
anybody else wants to?
I'm assuming these are mutually compliant.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just look at it, see it on.
I didn't see the notification.
But they look like they would be.
They
That's all.
We'll see how they go.
Yeah.
So if there's other, if it does turn into a rush.
You're right.
It's just a single copy of all the
Yeah,
pieces, right?
yeah.
So-
Yeah, it's just a spec sheet that goes with the order, so.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, hopefully we should see some improvement there. Well, again, there's only so many things you can do. Stop people from driving crazy. All right, that would move us on to the agenda. First item is the water department budget review. We have paperwork in front of us, and I'm happy to see a number in the taxes.
Don't forget now.
But it's
that-
lower than last year.
Yeah, a lot of hard work has gone into just these preliminary numbers from what we've already talked about, and we'll go over some of the changes that Alyssa made since we last spoke. Plus, we're also, again, we're waiting on the listers to finalize our grand list, which should be done shortly. And then we'll be able to give you 100% numbers. But at this point, our preliminary look is pretty favorable in reference to, not adding additional expense and also keeping the tax rate. Actually, it'll be a slight decrease the way we currently have it. Accurate. If you want to go to page 10, we'll start looking at just the water specific portion of this. A couple of items that we wanted to talk about. The revenues. We've set the same revenue number. You can see what we did for our 21 actuals. We're a little bit, and again, it depends on how we do in the spring with our billing to see how we're going to do in terms of our meeting our current year's forecast. So we kept it pretty much flat to see how those numbers look.
The last rate increase was last September, was it?
Yes. And we're not proposing based on this current
For
budget
the spring,
for anything for the spring for water or sewer. So at this point, those numbers would be reflecting the current charges for service. There would be no changes in the current number. A couple of things that again, we've been working through. Some of these accounts, we've been trying to get rid of some of these old accounts that have not had activity for a period of years because it starts to clutter your report, makes it difficult to sort of follow along. But be that as it may, there still are some things in here that you'll notice that potentially do not have.
but they have to stay
Numbers.
on 3 years, don't they? That's the last year they were used. I think it's 3 years.
I think yes, they would like past your audit.
Right.
Your
So you have to wait.
So you have to wait a little bit. So that's why some of this stuff does not have particular activity in there. We've talked at, in the penalties and interest section, we talked a lot about the changes in the bonds that were the old negative interest bonds, and then they were refunded, and then they were created with new bonds, and then dropped some of the overall bond indebtedness of the water fund specifically. So a lot of that activity relates to those transactions specifically with the that transition. The connections and basically again we have nothing for the cell tower.
What about the Northwest News?
We did speak with Westminster today, and we're going to follow up with a conversation with the two people on the board. They still have some.
You've got zero
I
in
have
here.
to put a number in.
Right. We'll put in a new number. So
I mean, I would think it would be at least the 24,000, but.
right.
Yeah.
So that would go in.
Okay, that's why it's sitting right now, empty.
Right. So we're going to meet with them hopefully next week. I'm just waiting on some follow-up dates and times for that. The one thing I think that and it's highlighted here under grant revenue, $1,000,002, that is the money that we had discussed previously about the ARPA money, potentially the state ARPA. So we wanted to show it in there. Obviously, if we don't receive the money, then it won't have any impact in terms of the real being expensive. It's just a placeholder to show you that solution.
And you have an offset in the expenses too, or the.
Yes.
Yeah.
For that.
So it doesn't impact the
It
actual.
doesn't
budget.
really-
And I won't know based on just the state schedule of review of all those grant applications. The earliest I'll hear back from them, I think it's April 15th, on
Okay.
where they stand on the intended use plan. So,
Now, excuse me,
Mhm.
wait till you're down there.
go ahead.
Can you still file for anything with them?
Well, there's another round after this round. So, yes,
Because when you and I had spoken, or I think it was a meeting here anyways, those streets were highlighted up there on Crystal Hill. And
right.
my memory may not be 100% accurate, but way back years ago, we had talked, a different board, different water people at the time. I remember them talking about if we ever did anything up there, doing a loop system. Because there was a concern that if the line went down, the high school would be, it'd be a bump in the road for the high school and the residents who live there. Did we have any information that, when we were looking at a loop? And there was some talk, if I remember correctly from that time, and I sent you that article because I got it mixed up with the
Right.
sewer,
Right.
but there was some talk of going straight up over Kissel Hill with the water line. Or
that
maybe it was
sounds
going
right.
down by St. Johnsbury and up the driveway, but to maintain a loop in case there was a break.
I think there would be, again, if we replace that old pipe there,
Right.
which is part of what that request would be, they would definitely do a loop for pressure and also for secondary sourcing.
Okay,
They haven't designed it yet, but
Yeah.
that would be one of the requirements as it would go forward.
okay,
So, right, they don't want to have dead ends and they don't want to have water sitting because that creates all
Right.
sorts of other
Mhm.
issues for,
Yeah.
for the treatment. And, so yes, there would be some piece of that that would go into design.
okay. Great.
But again, we're just waiting until we hear back on
Sure.
where that thing stands. The cell tower lease, the contractor who was originally contracted, if you guys remember, we talked about this over a year ago. And the person that was charged with the demolition has ended up taking those sites over from AT&T and is trying to remarket those sites before he demos them.
Mhm.
So we met out on the site back in late summer, August, early September, and just said, listen, we're certainly more interested in it coming back on as an active lease, and we are having this tower dismantled and all of the buildings taken away and basically just returned back to a meadow.
Mhm.
So I spoke to him about a month ago. He's still marketing, he does not have anybody specifically lined up for that tower. But at this point, he's still not scheduling a demo, so we're sort of in a holding pattern. So I did not program any revenue in the lease, just because we just don't know. So
Sure.
if and when he comes up with a proposal and I bring it back to the board and it looks like something that he might be interested in continuing, then we'll obviously modify the budget accordingly, but at the moment, that's sort of where that stands. It's in limbo, so we did not program any additional monies in there. But it's still not out of the question that that revenue could be potentially coming. Going through so we're on page 11, and stop me if you've got specific questions, or you can wait and we'll go back. It's whatever your preference is. Most of those line items in that general administration portion of the budget haven't changed dramatically. We went through all this with Melissa as well as with Brian, looking at allocations. I think the one thing that we did sort of revise, as you can see, there are some changes to some of just the salary allocations, just because of changes in our costs. Not necessarily because we changed the percentages of the allocation, we just changed costs. So you can see a slight decrease in that overall line item.
Can you tell me what the personnel benefits line is? We haven't had that before.
One of the items that we've discussed and we're going to bring forward with both the town and the village would be to bring in a person who would be a benefits administrator and a personnel administrator to help take over those functions. I think, we had split that function before with the finance director. I don't think anybody was terribly happy with how that worked out.
Underwhelmed.
Underwhelmed. All right, I'll leave it at underwhelmed. So the issue is, in all honesty, we still need some support because it's falling upon myself and Alyssa to do a lot of those personnel functions. So, and to be real honest about it, sort of the same type of, we get to it when we get to it, so it doesn't get the attention it really deserves or it needs, or it takes up, in Alyssa's case, inordinate amount of time to go through the benefit plans to make sure that everybody's paying the appropriate rates and the deductions are correct, and that any changes in the program has been properly put back through on our payroll system so that everything is checking out. And it went on for a substantial amount of weeks for her to get those areas corrected. And in multiple cases, we had to go back to employees, changing their deductions, in some cases saying, you owe us money, in other cases, we owe them money. Not a good situation because employees get upset, obviously, when those things happen. Nobody likes to be told that they owe additional money. for a benefit that they thought they had already paid for. So it's an important thing that I think we have to really make sure that we're spending the appropriate amount of time and energy supporting. And we're not getting to some of the other things that we should be getting to. Our safety committees not meeting on a regular basis. Our personnel policies that we've talked about, there's some things that could be updated and should be updated. So really, that was one of the discussions going forward.
Oh, no, we just finished that like a year or so.
There's always,
From my standpoint, I
Right.
certainly agree with the personnel benefits admin, but I
Right.
think perhaps the word admin should be in there, just so we understand it's a position, because it just says personal benefits, that's all.
that would make
Just the
sense.
language, just to
On
make
the
sure we're
computer,
clear.
the computer, I found it had a note on it.
It may have had.
And it didn't
Well,
have
it
enough
says
room
new
to fit.
position, but, oh, it says that in the village section. I didn't carry.
But it doesn't say so here.
I didn't carry it
That's,
forward
that's
to
what
here.
it was.
Okay, yeah, and that's why, okay. So it just is too long,
So
and
it's
we
a
have
part-
so many
it's a part-
characters.
We're not really
Position.
quite sure what we're gonna call it yet.
Right.
So,
The question I have, Scott,
Yeah.
is you might have mentioned it, but I'd like to have you develop it. Take the manager's salary as a number, 13,000. For the sewer department, it's 11,800.
Yeah.
Now,
Did I not change that?
you know,
Equalize, right?
we've all had this 2015-15,
Right.
and I don't think we ought to mess with that.
No, that was just my mistake.
Just
Oh,
stay
okay.
equalized,
So
yeah.
change it,
So you'll adjust.
change that number.
And that would apply to probably the second line too, within there.
Yeah,
I think that's different, I think that's a different number between,
I changed the water and then forgot to carry it over.
The sewer, okay. The one thing I did
so
want to talk to you
the
about.
water number is the right number, is it?
Yes.
That allocation, that
Okay.
number is right, so we'll update the other,
Other one, so it says the same.
right. Under salaries and wages for water personnel, one of the things we need to talk about is, I've got two, I'm sorry.
Are you still on that? first other
No,
section?
go ahead, yeah, we'll go back.
Just a quick, so on the next one where it says EA to manager,
Yes,
that was 23,
Oh, the executive assistant, yeah.
now it's 0.
because part of that person will be rolled into the.
Okay.
Personnel
Personnel.
benefits.
Into
They're
that
gonna
one,
do,
the new,
they're
yeah,
gonna do sort
Okay.
of multiple things.
I got you.
Right.
The question I had, I wasn't here for that first budget session, I was on Zoom or whatever.
Yeah.
But I did the math on really the finance staff. And, which is what I think is, what the office staff is listed at, is I think it's the finance staff. And it came out to like, if, using the general fund, which is a 20% allocation, it came out to like $137,000. I divided it by 2, it's like $67,500 salary for 2 people. And I can't believe that that's the number. I mean, we can't possibly pay that much for accounting clerks. And so I just raised that as an item to check.
We can double check those numbers.
And that's our half,
Well, we're coming
Well,
in.
this is our
portion of it.
portion, yeah,
Right, yes.
20% on the general fund and 15 each
Right.
on these 2,
Mhm.
so, and then 50 for the town. But I said, if those numbers are correct, we've got to have a discussion, I think, about, this deals with the union contract and everything else.
Yeah.
But, there has to be.
And of course, remember, they're town employees, even though we pay for their services, they're still town employees. So the town basically has more say
Yeah, I'm
on
not-
the contract than we do.
I'm just saying.
Right, but we can look at those numbers.
I gotta look at
remember
those
off the top
numbers.
of my head.
and,
Yeah.
we'd have to go back and we can, it's in her personnel spreadsheet. We'd have to go back and pull the.
If the
Pull the
town's,
base.
if the town's budget in the book that we have, the annual contract, is that dollar amount is the same as the three combined dollar amounts here, that's our 50%.
I think
Yeah,
this- I
and
think this
working-
is right. There's two, but they've also been here for like 30 years, so they,
No, well,
It's continued to grow.
they're both paid the same. They're both on the
They
same
were,
pay scale.
because they got equalized by our previous manager.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
another thing, but.
And, yeah, another ball of wax.
But but I think the point is that there has to be a relationship between what a job responsibilities are with what the pay is.
Mhm.
And I think that, like I said, I want you to confirm the numbers and we can discuss that at another time. I think that was another one that jumped out at me on the first budget.
Did we get to your question?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. The next general category, salary and wages, we did add a bullet in there that we need to have a conversation about. Two of my three people in the water department are currently retirement eligible.
Yep,
Neither one are going anytime in the next year, but they certainly,
good.
barring, and health is always a concern. I think we all, never know with that, and we hope that that never is the case, but the two issues that I have here is we need somebody who can go through the training and become certified as a plant operator, because my two senior guys are both the guys who complete.
Mhm.
And my new guy is just starting. It's going through the steps and he's gonna sit for his testing and he's progressing and it's great. But he's got to go 3 years in order to get certified as an operator after he passes his test.
And
So
3 years after the test.
in order to be certified by the state.
Mhm.
So the concern is that we would need at some point here fairly soon, and we put it in for 6 months, and it's something that we can review and talk about, seeing how we perform through the year. But it might make sense to start recruiting for that position halfway through this budget, thinking that eventually we're gonna have to have that person on staff. Because we're gonna lose one of those two people probably in the next 2 years. And probably both of them within the next 4 years. So, and given the time that it takes to get people certified, it's a real concern. And to find a certified water plant operator is very, very difficult.
Can you tell me how much of that 174 is actually the 6 months for the person? Because of course, the 143, 177 is this current year, but we have increases through the CBA. So what's the difference?
it was around 20,000.
Okay, for half year. Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because the difference what we have is
So we
31,000.
put the money in with the understanding that, again, it doesn't do anything to this year's tax rate if we don't need budget or we have other pressure, as we do our mid-year next year, before we would actually recruit and bring somebody on, I think we talk about where we are financially so that we wouldn't take on a burden that we can't afford. But I wanted to program money in there and have a conversation because I think we're reaching a point where we're gonna have to do some sort of a succession plan here so that we're not caught with a real problem.
No, I think that's wise.
Mhm.
I think it's
So-
wise.
Well, the only other option would be to contract that time frame out, but that's gonna cost you a lot more money.
I haven't looked at
Did what this
anybody
is.
recently to go in to do that as a contract, but
Right. But what I'm saying is,
Right.
to me, this makes more sense to do the plan ahead with us.
yeah, I
Then,
mean,
because if you went to one of the private outfits to fill in the gaps,
they love to come in and they usually give you a nice entry level price.
Exactly.
And they get you nice and comfortable. And then,
we'd be better off putting that money
And they
into our
sink
own
it when you
people.
need them.
and then they know that they're there for the next 15 years and it becomes a real
Yeah.
problem. Performance becomes a problem and price becomes a problem. That's always been my experience with these independent operators. But again, neither guy, is leaving tomorrow. But they had both reached that point where, you know, they've got pretty close to their max time and they're approaching that point where they could go for 30 years, you know, max time. So it's just a concern. So we'll leave that number in there. And like I said, we'll come back to you sometime before the midpoint next year when we have hard numbers to look at and we'll hopefully see where we are. What is programmed in it. Employee benefits, pretty much, and again, this took a tremendous amount of time on Alyssa's part to get this updated. Some of the numbers were adjusted. We just couldn't figure out how some of the numbers were applied to the previous year. So she went back through and made some updates and some allocations and had to do some work to try to get things realigned. So you'll see that there's a differential there on some line items. Some increase, some decrease, but it's a more accurate reflection, I think, of the true allocation of the costs.
Do you think the uniform line should go up considering a potential of another person and the cost from this year? I can't imagine they'll go down. I mean, typically those guys buy what, boots and stuff every year.
Brian didn't say, but I can just check with him.
Yeah, I think we would, yeah, there would be a minimal amount for
Yeah,
for 6 months for starting, and not too crazy about that. I think we could find that within the current budget. I think the biggest thing then on the insurances, again, a lot of time and energy went into trying to do allocations. I know
Some of them.
it's still, there's a couple areas that Alyssa's a little frustrated on, and she's trying to get some clearance or some guidance from the LCT, but I'm still not 100% sure. But I think the biggest change there that you can see is the workers' comp line, which is,
Yeah, I saw that. It went up significantly.
and that's, again, it's just a question of experience. You guys know experience and what you pay with. So,
Don't you think the health insurance line is probably going to increase more? I mean, I thought they didn't set their rates until later in the year. Usually not somewhere in the vicinity of 9%.
I think it's an annual.
Could be worse this year.
annual basis.
Right, but you think it starts in January? I thought it was later in the year. They haven't
So
forecast.
the increases would be like half a year.
I know all the hospitals are looking for more money, but whether or not health insurance is gonna.
health insurance plans haven't said anything. And I think it's one of the unfortunate side effects. I think they've done fairly well under COVID in a weird way. So, because, yeah, I think a lot of people canceled a lot of elective and other types of procedures, and I think the insurance companies actually did okay,
Benefited from that, yeah.
which is, you know,
An upside to a bad side.
yeah, it's a horrible upside to a bad situation. Exactly.
On the workers' compensation, the lost time that it was experienced in the water department, was it because of an accident or was it just a medical issue?
That was medical loss time. We haven't really had an
That
accident.
wouldn't work.
Okay, so that's good from a workers' comp
Right.
standpoint, but it's a, if you're rolling the dice, you never really know.
That's true. Just reminding me of that call in the state police today, when my employees got hit by a car
Oh, jeez.
yesterday.
We haven't had that happen.
No. That's a good thing. Yeah, we stand in the road on purpose.
Yeah, well, I understand that.
Right.
You do, but you know, unfortunately, so do we sometimes.
While she was flagging, yeah. She was about ready to release the traffic, and this elderly gentleman just hit her. So she had numbness, she's got, impact on her leg. She's been out, it's out today, it's probably out tomorrow. But hopefully there's no additional nerve damage, so. Anyway, the insurance deductible, that didn't have any dollars before. What's the change this year? It's not only $1,000, just a query. At the bottom of page 11.
Not very long.
Which is insurance deductible.
So everybody else has something
Yeah,
in the
we-
insurance deductible except for sewer, so I I didn't know.
So you plug the $1,000 in.
Because we have a deductible in there.
There is a deductible in policy.
Right,
It just
okay.
depends on if there's a plan. So far with water, we're pretty good. I'm on the top of page 12 here.
Mhm.
Biggest change that what we looked at here, there's a couple things, I think. Telemetering,
Mhm.
I believe, Brian had ordered some, he wants to try to get more places converted, so he put a little more money in there.
Right,
We'll save us
there's so many per year.
on the meter reads, and we had sort of lost some, we lost a little momentum with that during COVID.
Mhm.
So we're hoping to regain some of that, and come back and get that back underway. So that's the biggest change there. The water agreements, and again, Melissa spent a lot of time with this today, trying to get that number. And it's really more of an internal service, right, between how it gets charged to who and why. I think she finished most of that today. So I don't know if you want to.
Other than finding the actual agreement to make sure that the buildings that we are assuming are part of the agreement are actually part of the agreement. Anybody knows where that is?
So that's agreements with water users?
No, it's the town. So it's Waypoint, the
Oh,
rec center,
town,
the rec
right.
pool.
Yeah,
So it's the water we provide.
why don't we provide them with those, we have those agreements.
Yeah,
I mean, there's copies of those agreements
I
in the books, it's in our trustee handbook.
So wasn't there something that applied to Wells Street playground too?
Yeah, it might be.
Rec department?
I think so.
Yeah.
And Blake Street. Blake Street garage.
It might be in that, it might be the copy, the most recent ones might be in
They're
the.
old,
trustee
they
handbook.
have not been
They're ancient. that's-
updated,
yeah.
yeah, they're photocopies and photocopies.
This was a question that kept coming up, every time we talked, it was, where's all the expense for that? And it's because they were willy-nilly going somewhere else. So
Yeah.
I brought them all back.
So that was really, I think, the biggest issue there, is trying to get those numbers correct. And then the telemetering portion, to get that back on track. Under his professional services, the next line item didn't really change a lot. Engineering, we kind of kept it low because if we do get a grant or something specific, we'll do the engineering as part of the ARPA process, so we don't need just put a whole bunch of additional money in there. The one that we weren't quite sure of that we kind of went back and forth about was the question for legal services. You can see that you don't have a lot of expense there, but we've sort of carried this number year after year after year. And not sure if there was a specific reason or purpose, or if it was just a placeholder in case we had a water quality problem or some other type of, I'm not quite sure.
Or would it apply to our agreements, our water agreements with other communities, like Westminster? Where would we stick it?
We've never really
Wow.
charged it
Yeah.
against it, so that's always been my question is, I don't know.
Any kind of legal services that were required by the water department.
Yeah.
Yes. Whether you get sued or whether you.
And it's
say
just
the
in
agreement.
case.
It's just a placeholder, but I want to point that out because I'm sure you guys look at that and say, well, why are you putting that in there? Because we haven't spent the money since, the last 3 budget years.
Keeps us covered in case.
So I think
Insurance.
it's right, it's basically a protection that if something does come, you at least have some seed money to start your legal defense.
Mhm.
And certainly, there's a major problem, $5,000 is going to get us very far. It's still there. Most of their IT really revolves around their SCADA systems, and we might have to do some upgrades with all of this cybersecurity.
Security stuff,
and,
yeah.
We did do some upgrades on the system. We might have to do more depending upon what's happening with some of this stuff going on. We get these warnings now weekly from the federal government that there's, heightened alerts for, especially SCADA systems that deal with water and sewer infrastructure. They think they're a potential target, so we're getting these constant emails from the federal government about these things, so we keep making sure, talking to our providers to say, you know, this is what we have, are we good, are we covered? So far, everybody says we're in good shape, we don't need to do anything additional, but, you know, we're in this sort of new age, so anything's possible, I'm not sure, you know, what's gonna happen with that, but I just want to bring that to your attention, because that is something that's been in the news and, you know, sort of. His office and basically his equipment lines, for the most part, fairly static. The only thing that could potentially change there is if we have to do another treatment for, remember last year we had all the discolored water because of the manganese and some of the other concerns, and so we've been talking to the state, we've been giving them samples, everything seems okay at the moment, but now we're back into this sort of spring recharge period, and we'll see how it goes through the summer. If we have to do some kind of treatment, that's where it'll come out of. Right now, we have the capacity to add the treatment fairly easily within the current plant operation, so it doesn't seem like we have to build in a whole new infrastructure to isolate some new treatment that would have to go in for just the manganese. But our plants at the state can sometimes complicate lives a little bit, so we're hopeful that that will be the case. And we'll let you know. But right now, there has been no additional money program for that specific problem. And it's a chemical process at this point, and like I said, if we entered into our existing process, it would not be real. Probably some testing and just some follow-up.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Just curious on the water office expense,
Mhm.
is that, it looks like that might be more than enough,
It looks like we
just
carried
based
over.
on the history there.
Right,
He doesn't update a lot of his general processing because most of this stuff is already automated, you know, and
I guess you're suggesting that perhaps it should be lowered because
Well,
we
the
don't spend that
forecast
much
is
money.
500,
Yeah,
right.
you know, year to
Yeah.
date, so far as 98.
I mean, we could put 1,000.
drop into a
there.
grand.
Previous timeframes, it was,
It's not a consistent.
$345.
I mean, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's a year where they gotta do more with that line item.
Not typically.
This year it was $2,000 and we only spent 98 so far, so.
Just,
I mean, I wonder, yeah, and I look at the computer purchases and wonder why we don't have more money there. I mean,
He says he is going to purchase that computer, so I put it in the forecast as being spent
For this year.
for this year.
Right.
He said he didn't need another one for next year.
And that's why I keep on, you know, again, because of the concern about any kind of cybersecurity, you know, they look at all of that constantly. Are you up to date? Are your operating systems good and everything so far is okay?
Mhm.
So he does have one, I believe it's in his laboratory, he wants to upgrade. And I think that's basically it. So,
so there'll be a purchase this year.
yes. Repairs and maintenance. So the biggest question here was we had made some changes in the water meters themselves. Of the expense line, if you look at the water meters, right in the current year.
They purchased the handheld.
Right.
So
So that's why you're seeing such a big expense and then a reduction back to the norm, was because those little handheld readers that they go out and do the automated reads with.
Yeah.
It were becoming problematic. We had had a couple of instances where they had gone out and done 2 or 3 days worth of readings, and then the systems failed and they weren't backing up properly, so they had to go back out and another 2 or 3 days.
Mhm.
It was becoming ridiculous. So he has a new set that had been brought in and installed and updated with a better system so that daily reads are captured and they won't lose any reads if they have a catastrophic failure. So it's a good investment from a time and manpower standpoint. So that's what that number is, why that is such a fluctuation from year to year. in the other maintenance, the major maintenance, he has a couple of motors that we just had some motor inspections on that might need to do some upgrading, but those are only like 8 to 10 grand. And at this point, he can cover that within sort of his, just his yearly allocation. There's not a major catastrophic or failure or replacement required for anything. And he is doing one more check, I believe it's on the Griswold. tank. And he has not gotten any information back on that yet. He has to do some tank work. It's nothing significant.
I don't remember what that Harper project was. I have to bring it along.
That was the one I put on there.
Yeah, what was it?
It was for what Scott's talking
Talking
about.
about right now, yeah.
But I think he knows more about it than we do, so
Right.
I think it's a non-issue,
At the moment, yeah,
at least for ARPA needs,
right.
yeah.
So he's in, at this point, he's in pretty good shape in terms of his, this is heavy maintenance and repair. Not anticipating anything significant with that. So now we're back up to the page 13.
What about the water facilities?
Yeah, it's jumped up.
Monitors and air compress.
Or monitors, is that it?
Yeah, monitors.
Monitors.
I don't know what those are.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that.
So the monitors and the air compressors, was the email he sent us today
Right,
that I did not read to see exactly what that was. I just looked at the amount of money and put it in. So if you read it,
it's part of that, right, it's part of that 12,000 that I talked about is in that
Yeah.
increase.
Okay.
And that would go back to historical mean, well, because that's a one-time deal. That's not a continuing expense that we have to start to worry about.
Do you have an idea about when we have to clean and inspect the tanks again? And we have every how many years?
He did tell me that, because we talked about that, and he thinks we're good for at least this year and next year, if I remember correctly.
Like every 3 or 4 years.
I think it was 4, and then I think we programmed it for the 5th, so I think.
Okay,
we're
so
still
FY
okay.
25 is what we're talking about.
Right. I think we're still okay with that. We did talk about that.
Thank you.
And he felt pretty good about that. Building expenses. We went back and forth about propane, what to do. Should we change it? Should we make major adjustments? At this point, we kept the line item consistent, and we'll see how we do in terms of budget. Right now, things are high, but I don't know what we're gonna forecast as we go through next year. So we sort of kept that line item consistent. That may or may not change. Chemicals are increasing slightly because those prices have gone up. And again, if we have to do additional chemical treatment for the manganese, that would also be part of that cost in there as well. So we threw in some money to make sure that we were covered if we had to do some treatment that would be mandated. So that's why that number is up slightly when you look at it from a year-to-year kind of progression. And we'll see how we do going forward with that. Again, I don't know if these inflationary issues are here. We're gonna start looking at, 5 to 7% annualized kinds of inflationary increases on some of this stuff. I hope not. But there was some of that kind of pressure on some of these budgets this year. And we'll see how, we'll see again how adjustments are made for the next year. Going forward, we did adjust gasoline slightly, if you look under the equipment line.
Scott, under the water plant building in Meadows, is that basically electric? Up under building expense?
yes, I think so.
Yes.
That's for the electricity. And then we moved the Griswold.
Because Griswold was electricity.
It was
Right.
over here under repairs and maintenance, so we zeroed that line out and moved it over here.
Right.
That's why.
It made sense to have all the electric somewhere.
Right.
in one- I don't know why it was in 2 places. We couldn't quite figure that out. So it just made sense to try to keep it in one spot. So under the actual equipment line, the only thing that, like I said, we did increase the gasoline thing. Just a we're currently paying for pump, and hopefully that might rectify itself over the course of the year, but we'll see. Project expenditures, the biggest thing for them is they do need a replacement vehicle, so we did put some extra money in for next year. I believe it's one of their pickup trucks. So,
We've been putting 7,000 in, haven't we? Now, have we put it into a reserve?
well, that was a long discussion, as a matter of fact, Chase.
Here's the conversation that I had today
A
with
long
our
conversation
with our
with our
auditor.
friends at RHR Smith.
So no, it hasn't been
Reserve.
reserved. So it's been in the budget, but it hasn't been reserved. So she's kind of threw out a few things, but she's going to think about it and get back to me to find out how we can maybe recover some of that. If not, just moving forward with like 21, 22, and then, so we would get those into, we're either gonna commit them, so a separate line item here, and in the audit, we will separate them out and call them committed, or we will set up a fund where they'll be moved, right?
So what it looks like
Capital
is you are gonna reserve the
I
7,000
am
this
for
year.
this
All
year,
right,
for
we
sure.
told her for sure we should do that.
And then,
We're not done.
that together with the 23,000 would give them the amount.
With their trade, would
We
get
give them
them,
enough,
Okay.
right. So,
But if you do that, you're not reserving any for next year.
unless we can recapture
I guess so.
right,
21 and maybe, I think 20 was not.
20 was.
I think they actually bought one in 20.
But we can adjust the approval
Right,
the following year, reserve more than 7,000 a
Right.
year. So it's like on a 4 year deal or something like that.
Like
I think that's what we
water's a
do.
little longer than that. Yeah. They don't use theirs as heavily, they're not doing as much of the heavy.
I think it was, yeah, so FY 1920, yeah, I'm sorry, in 2019, in FY 20.
Because we had the same problem with the police.
Right.
Accrual. It wasn't reserved.
Which I don't want to get off topic, but the only thing that this reminds me of is that the only village vehicle that we do have that we don't do this for is the pickup truck in the fire department.
They got a new pickup truck, didn't they?
A few years back, but we don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we
reserve
don't
that.
put money aside each year
No.
like we do for every other village vehicle.
Right, yeah, I see what you're
Which-
saying. Which probably should.
Probably should
But
start
then
doing
again,
that.
that's that whole fire department conversation.
And then it gets through the equipment committee discussion too, and I think.
Yeah.
No,
Part of
because
that-
that's a village truck.
Yeah, but when they look at overall resources, I think they look at all of those things, because they have put some of those through requests for like the grant process with FEMA and some of the other things. They have put some of those through before.
But usually,
Not this-
typically it always been large equipment, so it's
Maybe it's
not
been brush
pickup.
trucks or pumpers or something.
Yeah.
But
And we didn't use that fund.
Wade's correct, we have not
For the last-
reserved for that.
The only thing to make, going to me, because we do it
For every
for every
other
other village, currently every other village vehicle,
department, but not,
except for that one vehicle.
And we should.
I think so, I mean,
doesn't make
and
sense.
that, you know, usually they get like 10 years out of that vehicle,
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
roughly. Because of, but still, when the day comes to do something with it, whether it's new or whatever.
Although
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, that my most recent experience with in the school department, we had a water break in Saxon's River.
Right.
And, Sean was there. Sean is there at all of these Rockingham and Saxon's River problems because we pay him to be here during the day. And I think there was only one Saxon's River volunteer that made it to the
We talked about
But
that.
we were in Bellows was called for it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's because we've got Sean.
Someone
there. So I think that, what I'm saying is the fire committee ought to look at that vehicle as more of a,
Well, we're taking a hard look at daytime response, and that's something that we're gonna bring up. Once we get through this cycle of what is gonna get grant funded or not grant funded, then the committee's gotta go take a hard look at what's our equipment mix still, what's still needed. how can it be staffed? Because it's wonderful to have lots of equipment, but, you know, Monday through Friday, it's getting harder and harder for us to find bodies to run it. You know, it's okay in the evening, and it's okay at night, but anytime, you know, during the workday, it's a challenge, because guys are, you know, guys are working. And we can pull some of the highway guys, it's a really bad situation, and we've done that. But we have limited capacity. We talked about that going forward.
Yes.
So we might have to look at that long term. We're going to try to get some additional coverages during the day. So we're not ready to add it to the budget. We've talked about it. It might be something that we start talking about for next year. If this trend is continuing, we're going to have to, you know, as a community, decide how do we want to, what kind of response do we want to have available for these things, and how do we pay for it.
That's a problem that you're having everywhere.
Oh, yeah. What's that word? Yes, that
Whether it be
is
ambulance or
100%
fire.
true. And it's not a reflection, and I don't mean this to sound critical of our volunteers.
Oh, no, it's not.
Unfortunately, guys are at work, right? And they don't work here, they work, a lot of them are away. So,
Yeah.
Tony James is out delivering fuel, and he's not here.
Not
You know,
yeah.
He's driving a fuel truck, or he's out, you know. But otherwise, that guy's, you know, always.
Yeah, most jobs don't let you leave.
So it's becoming a real challenge. And I think it's something, you know, it sort of gets that whole conversation about what's the right equipment mix. It also gets in the conversation about how's our EMS, how's that being provided. We started those conversations because we've had concerns and, you know, talked about that at this meeting and other meetings, you know, about the Gold Cross
Yeah.
contract and those kinds of
Dispatch.
things.
All that.
So
State's looking at it too, so.
these are real problems. You know, I think we're gonna have to get creative on solutions, and it might not be the ways we've always done things, and that makes people upset, and people get
Territorial.
nervous, and, you know, it's just, at this point, all we're doing is having conversations, but at some point, the boards are gonna have to have, you know, pretty serious conversation about how we want to handle these things. How we pay for them. So it's coming. It's just not right yet today in this portion of the budget, but we want to bring that to your attention because that is a concern. And Judy is 100% right. So,
Yeah, sorry about that.
yep. All right, I lost my place.
We were at vehicle replacement, that was the conversation.
Yeah, I went backwards because we were talking about, oh, you were right. I wrote a note about reserving for vehicles and I got lost. So I gotta find my way back here. All right, so we're back to just project expenditures now, so we're back on page 13.
Right.
Not a lot of additional items within here. Again, you see the offset if we're successful on the ARPA. It's a little project, that's where you'll see the expense portion of that, everything else is pretty standard. Not really any additions or anything in that respect.
What
Debt
is-
service-
I'm sorry, I just want to ask, what's highway app revenue piece here? Is that for equipment rental
Yes,
when we use their equipment?
there have been times when they have shared equipment and then they have charged it off. Sometimes Rob will have some, sometimes Water will have some, so that's what it is.
Okay.
We haven't done that, but we just sort of traditionally kept that available. So.
Yeah, 14.
That service is pretty much what we've been working through, and I know that we want to spend an inordinate amount of time and sit here as well as with the list to go through all of the refunding of the old bonds, negative interest bonds, as well as updating, make sure we had all the current bonds correct and trons and allocations for class projects. And at this point, I think we're in pretty good shape with that in terms of what we've got, and our budget reflects the correct current principal and interest. So I think we feel pretty decent about that.
Good question.
Is that 269,783 the right number? $6 less than
Previous year?
somebody did.
What?
Or was it supposed to be 269,789?
Well,
Well,
no,
interest. could be-
interest varies
Well,
from
this
year to
one-
year.
Most of this
This
is
is,
principal.
this is the previous year.
Right.
This is the date, the
Forecast,
forecast.
yeah, right.
And it
So
does
forecast is a little
slightly
more,
change.
Okay.
not significantly.
Correct.
Six
Oh,
bucks.
pretty darn close.
Yeah, pretty close.
Because it's most of principal pay for the year.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
necessarily interest. Unfortunately. for
It's
the
like the
water.
first one went down a little bit.
So then when you get to the top of page 14, if everything that we've gone through on this current iteration of the budget comes to pass and we've not proposed an increase in rates, you'll still see a positive cash flow to the account for the current forecasted budget.
We have to add in those few things we talked about, and then I also counted that.
Wade saved us $1,000.
You did?
That one that was. budgeted.
Oh, the office thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So
So
that'll
far.
go up from 153,997 to 153.
But I found-
I found-
Before we're adding mistakes.
I did, I found a $10,000 Excel mistake, so,
Oh, there you go.
and not in our favor.
Oh, that's not the,
So we'll go down. We'll do it 145.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll finalize those items. But at least in terms of our performance and in terms of our investment and that enterprise fund, it's in good shape. Now we have our
So
sewer
plus we
fund.
have like $1 million in.
We're in good shape in terms of our cash in that, right?
Yeah.
So that fund, in terms of your rates and in terms of, how it's been managed and going forward, I think we're pretty good, feeling pretty
I
confident.
think on that one, you can afford to be a little tight with things and run things close to the bar because there is so much.
Make an adding mistake, that's the account making it.
We'll make sure that that's the only account we make.
Okay.
So now we have our sewer account, which has been a little more of a challenge than our water account. Not necessarily because of management performance, just because we just haven't had the numbers right. So I feel better that we're in a better position based on the work that's been done. A lot of work through this board and finance committee and Alyssa and Nimrek and Cynthia. And I think at least at this point, I have more confidence as we go through these numbers tonight than we've had in previous presentations to you. So again, just as a general point of discussion, we have not proposed an increase in the septic or sewer rates for this budget, so it reflects our current rates. As you can see, based on our forecast for this year, we're going to exceed our budgeted 22 amount. And again, because those numbers are just, it's hard for us to really see the feel that it just made sense to leave that number alone, in terms of our budget revenue. It still puts us in a position to be cash positive after our 23 budget, as we go through all the other items here.
I think COVID had a positive impact on sewer loans.
Well, you know what had a more
Yeah.
positive impact? We stopped doing a bunch of projects and tried to figure out how to pay for them, so that helped.
Yeah, that helps. That's true. Definitely.
So.
There is an
and-
upside, yeah.
Not that the projects weren't necessary, and they are, and they're good projects, but I think we got ourselves maybe too, it's just too many things were not, just not completed and put into their proper accounting. So it created confusion, and I think to be fair to the board was frustrated by it, and they should have been, because it was confusing. And we weren't getting the right answers, and I think at least at this point, we feel better that we're giving you the answers that are appropriate. So with that being said, looking at our revenues, we're still in a positive trend. we sat down with Rob and went through most of these, so we feel pretty good about where we are in relationship to the budget to actuals, so that you can see that I don't think we're being overly aggressive in any of these forecasts. It's the biggest issue that changed, and I'm not sure. It's 120,000 that shows up. So you can see, for some reason, we forecasted, if you look at fiscal year 22, under the roll call bond, I think we just missed a zero,
Oh, yeah.
is all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be 120,
Oh,
so, not 12.
but not 12. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so we're fine. It's just, that was just didn't pull the extra zero through. So we'll change that to the 120. Because we're looking at that.
Scott, on the bond proceeds, as I understand it, we have to get a vote at our village meeting to borrow the funds to pay for the dryer.
Well, we have already gone to the bank and they've given us, right, our rate, and they've locked in a 5-year loan. So the question is, you have two options. You can put it on a warning and have it voted on at the village meeting. If that's what you choose for the 5-year, it's a general obligation bond for the 264. That's one option. So it's roughly
264.
I think the total is 264 something. Or you can, again, pay for it out of the current budget, and then you're gonna run a deficit in your fiscal year. But then going forward, it won't impact you in terms of.
But it shows a bond in next
FY
year.
23, yeah.
So
So we can either have
Right,
it
so
in
my-
here and you just decide to do it, or we can take it out of here and put it.
So my feeling is because of their like flat fund position or cash position, I think we should get the approval at the village meeting and borrow it this year and have it run through the books this year, which will, because we've got the purchase on the books this year.
We
It
did.
will basically offset that
In the same year.
in the
Can
same
we do
year.
that at the meeting? Can you vote for things?
For things that happened in the previous fiscal year, I don't think so.
No,
Well, it's still the fiscal year at the meeting,
The
right?
meetings in
Right,
Yeah, that's
May,
true.
Right.
so we got plenty of time to do it. The
You
banks
need
are,
to do it during this fiscal year.
yeah,
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 To actually,
you have a little time there.
right. I think we should do it.
so you want the question.
So then the
on
question
where
is, so we would
Put it on
move,
the
we
warrant.
would move the 256,
Right.
because you recognize it in this budget year, you wouldn't recognize it
Next year,
next year.
what's the interest rate?
2%.
3%.
We have ARPA funds, why are we paying 2%?
Well, we're trying to get,
Well, there's two things we're doing with it. First of all, we're working with Efficiency Vermont to see if they will offset part of the cost of it.
Uh-huh.
They're still meeting with Rob, and they've been going over our electric consumption and the offsets of hauling versus what we're paying to do the additional electric. And they still haven't given us a number of what they're going to contribute towards this, so that's why we went forward with the full 256. We don't know.
anything we get, we can just pay for.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's why we put that forward as a full general obligation bond to go forward for approval.
And we have the money to pay it now. Without going to a bond. We have it in
no,
our
we're.
unrestricted fund balance.
We're in a deficit position,
In our fund balance?
not in the fund balance, but the fund balance includes all the plans. But in
Yes,
terms
we
of
put
cash,
this,
They would squeeze some of your.
His
cash.
utility,
You'd be in-
our cash
Right.
our
is
cash position. in the
right
utility.
about break even.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
down a little bit. I don't know, I haven't seen a balance sheet for a while.
You would not be able to carry the 256 with your current.
No, on the wastewater. No, I was talking about the general
You're
fund.
talking about general.
Yeah, I was talking, yeah, separate.
No,
Again, we have ARPA funds, so I don't see the point of
Well, but I
getting a
think-
bond.
We can always prepay the loan.
Correct.
Okay, if we get a blessing from some ARPA, whether it's our own ARPA or the state,
Right.
or whatever, we can pay this thing down.
Right.
Uh,
This helps you end the year on not,
But I think it helps
Such a
us end the
deficit.
year on a more realistic basis in terms of how was the operations.
Oh, no, I prefer not to carry it forward into the fiscal year. I'm just saying that.
So we'd have to adjust the budget back. to
Well,
show,
If you look at the bottom line here, go to the back. Okay.
There you go.
that is gonna reduce our revenue, so.
So, if you look at the forecast,
Mhm.
okay, now keep in mind that the 268 up at the top of page 18
Mhm.
is the purchase.
Mhm.
Okay? And the deficit is 382. That's the forecasted deficit. Okay? That includes the, if you offset it with the loan,
Mhm.
then that would go down by 268,000, so we'd be in the red by about 100,000, which I think would be a better indication of our operation.
Right, and then if you look at our
And then,
forecast,
but then the forecast for 146,000 positive
would have to
would-
change,
Would
right?
change.
would change.
Because we would be taking the
You're gonna take
256
Because you take
away.
the 268 out, yes,
265 or
or whatever
56
that
out.
dollar.
Out of the revenue.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be tight with our.
So we're gonna be tight.
expense, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that's why I think in the fall, we've got to look, we're talking about rate increases, we've got to look at the sewer.
Yes,
But we know the water's okay,
right,
but I think we do have to look at the sewer and maybe adjust
right, but I wouldn't recommend it until the fall.
until the fall.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that might be, again, depending upon how we're performing, I think it would make sense to look at a 2% or some number. That would help offset, bring us pretty close to a break even at that point.
And like I said, as long as the loan terms allow us to prepay, then if we get monies from other sources, we can use it.
Correct. So if Efficiency Vermont gives me 100,000
Yeah.
or 200,000 or some number, that just goes automatically as an offset, which is correct, just prepay.
If.
Well,
Speculative.
there's no guarantees with any of those programs. I mean, the best you can do is, bring them into the discussion, which we have, and
It seems, I heard that they were pretty excited about it though.
they seem to be, they're
Yeah.
trying to give us a number. I think they want to
Do something.
fund this because I think they think it's important. Because they like the concept.
Mhm.
And now it's just a question
It's
of,
moving the needle forward for the
Oh, hell
attorney.
it's real sustainability.
Yeah.
And now the problem that they're having is trying to also, we're a precedent, right? So once they've set the precedent.
Right.
Then
Other,
other places too.
correct. So that's why I think they're being more deliberate than
Or better or worse.
Mhm.
normal. I think they
Well, we know
want these
it's-
things, I think they want these things to happen. I think they're trying to encourage other communities to do this. This
Mhm.
makes
Sure, that
sense.
was increased our consumption of
Yeah,
electricity.
yeah, so, yeah.
It is.
So,
Which is something that if we can, the second piece, which is, again, when Deb's talking about ARPA, we talked about the materials handling portion of it. If we can get to the point where we can handle larger amounts of the dried material, we can run the dryer over longer periods of time, and you don't have that fluctuation in startup.
No, so you actually
heating it up.
reduce your electricity.
Correct. So over time, we should see that start to decline once we get that larger handling capacity. Now we're just stuck with how much we can put into those,
At a time,
into
yeah.
the hoppers and keep
Into the
going.
bag.
There's more startup and shutdown.
Yes.
Mhm.
Is that what you're-
So it's
Takes it
inefficient.
longer to start, takes it, yeah.
Gets to temperature, then you
Yeah.
start, running material, then by the time you process that hopper, you gotta
Some
shut it
shut it-
down. and
Yeah, exactly.
You wait, it's not wasted, but it's
John T. told me it's like,
Not
it's
efficient.
like a big, what those units that I've got two of my house.
Heat pumps.
Oh, heat
It's
pump.
like a big heat pump. Technology.
So be that as it may. So,
Okay,
so a long conversation about, the question is, move those numbers into the fiscal year 22, then we'll have to make some adjustments on the 20. So we'll see that.
And I think it would be a better reflection of what happened in 22. And
Sure.
what happened in
I don't, yeah, I think we all had discussed even through the summer that we weren't gonna break even this year.
Mhm.
We narrowed the gap, but we're not.
Yes, but not completely over the hump, yeah.
Right. So anyway, we're back to penalties and interest, I think, the next area that we were talking about. And the reason why you're seeing nothing in there yet is because we're not past due yet, so they
Right.
haven't applied.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
that will get applied against the. not past due.
May,
I believe it's 10.
yeah, May 10th.
Yes, I think that was a date.
Okay.
Dan told me. I probably have it wrong. She'll text me and tell me. Tell me. Oh, she hasn't texted me. I must be right.
Yeah, that's it. And sewer bills, water sewer bills are due this
So-
Thursday.
So we got that going for us. The other revenue sources we talked about, so we'll move that loan and bond proceed to the current year. And adjust that accordingly for fiscal year 23.
Mhm.
We're not anticipating any coronavirus money. At this point in the 23 budget, nothing has been proposed. So now we're up on the top of page 15. One thing that we're going to take a look at is, I believe, our Saxon River contract expires. Rob and I were just talking about this. I think we have to renew it next year.
Mhm.
So sometime during the fiscal 23 year budget, that contract expires. So we put in the current contract rate, but there will be some adjustment to that going forward. Those numbers
I
will,
put in.
It shows a bump.
I think, 1% or something. We just. put
It's
a-
like a 3%. It was a
It's like a
3%
placeholder, we
increase.
put a placeholder number in there, but
Yeah.
it's not in a contract yet, so I don't wanna, you know. Again, depending upon where things are with his operation, it could be a little more than that, but we just wanted to throw something there, just to hold it in place. And see again with the other subject amounts, we increased that slightly based on the last couple of years worth of actuals.
Mhm.
I think that number is gonna hold, seems to be fairly consistent at this point, which will help on the revenue side. And again, if we look at a fall increase, that again might also be another number. We did not adjust that for any type of mid-year or other increase, we just left it rate wise, same.
Your forecast is basically carrying over the year-to-date number, which I would think would be conservative,
It is. It is.
which is good. I mean, anything that we can help reduce the negative is good.
Yeah, we're not chasing.
Yeah, I don't know if there's gonna be any more, so I wasn't really
Yeah.
quite sure what to put in there, so.
I just wanted to bring up the connection permit
Okay,
piece.
Yep.
I know that was one of the conversations about the water and sewer, chapters of the ordinances for the village, and that those have not been changed in many years, and in that is the connection permit.
the
There
extra
are people,
fees, the
there are
cost,
people who actually have those, who've had them for decades,
right.
and the cost that they paid was so minimal, is still holding them. I don't know if it has any impact, if there's anything we can do to change that.
Ventures, right?
Right, they're not using them, but they hold them.
Right. Okay, you're talking specifically for ventures, correct? That we're going to the industrial park? that we
Yeah, well,
funded
also
license-
places like the Highlands and stuff like that.
Right, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, okay.
I think there was 3 or 4 of them still out there,
Mhm. They have-
but the initial, so Scott's familiar with it. Those were investments made by, whether it was, if I remember correctly, maybe Wade does, people, members of BFADC at the time,
Mhm.
were select individuals to help fund the line going from
Going
here
Out there.
out there to the
Right, yeah.
industrial park.
Mhm.
So Yeah, theoretically, you could have, say, for example, if I had one of those debentures and somebody wanted to put a McDonald's at the top of 5 and 103, I'd say, okay. You can have it for
Sell-
25
You
grand.
could sell it to them, yeah.
Yeah,
Because it's placeholder.
right, right.
But does that, if that impacts, I believe, on whether we could add anything more with
Yeah,
those
I
holders
don't know.
to that system? Yeah, so it was just a conversation
Sure.
that comes up from time to time.
Well, I noticed that there's no
Sure.
actual, there's no actual for 21, there was no actual revenue.
No,
Yeah,
There had been a new connection.
no,
right.
How many of them are left? 4 or 5?
No, I think 2 or 3,
Oh,
but I may be wrong. I don't remember it all.
not many.
No, there weren't very many, but
but if somebody wanted to hook on.
Yeah.
Could you have to be concerned about the capacity because there are other holders up there who haven't used them yet? There's 2 or 3. I don't know, just a thought, but increasing revenue in that usage, in that line, that's all. It's not gonna impact our budget. I'm sorry. That takes the
Pretty
general government.
straightforward, and kind of seems.
Mhm.
Right.
Looks like water.
It's pretty much gonna follow. There aren't, we can walk through if you want, just as, again, we talked about a lot of these things like Jason just mentioned in the previous budget, they pretty much follow the same standard. A lot of energy was spent with some of the allocations. Personnel is pretty much just standard contractual, nothing proposed different. We looked at a potential 1%. One of the things that we have to do, and this is another concern for them, is we didn't want to add additional manpower, but we're going to have to get another operator license in the sewer department as well. And to maintain licensing in that department is another one. They've increased the requirements. I think Rob is a 4, if I remember, his license is a class 4. They have upgraded the requirements and all the other things in order to be a class 4. Typically, when somebody's been holding a license like he has, they don't make them go through the licensing, relicensing, they sort of grandfather people in. But the professional boards are making them do it as well. So there might be some additional sort of costs, and a portion of that might have to go towards licensing, because I got to need somebody else to get through that process as well.
Is he the only licensed operator?
He's the only class 4. I believe we have another class. I think we have a class 1 and another person who might be a class 2, I don't remember. But that plant requires a class 4 operator.
so that's, I think, very important. You mentioning earlier water, and now you're talking sewer. Right, we've somehow got to catch up to the curve or get ahead of the curve as far as getting somebody in there. Then there's the years for that.
Just getting through the licensing
Right.
process is probably an 18 to 24-month process. And then you have to have so many years after you pass in order to be accredited, so to speak. So it's a
Yeah.
pain to get through it. So we're gonna hopefully work through that as well.
I'm glad you got that on the radar.
And again, none of those guys have made any mention, they're not going anywhere, but these are just things we gotta plan as we go forward.
Right.
Because they're exposures for us otherwise, and they're not easy fixes. God forbid if we lost somebody, it would be a real disaster. Try to replace them. The employee benefits, somewhat the same as we've gone through with the other line items, some minor adjustments here and there, mostly because of allocations that are incorrect. So that's Alyssa has spent a lot of hours and energy trying to get those corrected. And I think that more accurately, the 23 budget more accurately reflects where we are, and more accurate reflection of what we're going to spend for next year as well. Same thing with insurance, not a lot of changes there. The biggest issue, I think, that our property insurance costs will forecast. We haven't hit that 22,000 number for a while, so we're going to go back and just verify that everything is accurate with that. But we dropped that slightly. You can see.
on the insurance deductible, is it a per incident deductible, or is it a
For
annual?
property and
deductible?
casual, it is, but you can have multiple instances depending on what it is.
Because
Like the last time we filed for deductible from there, I think when we had a flood and we lost some equipment, and I think we did file for some replacement of pumps and a few other things. There wasn't a lot, but there was a deductible then.
But like I said, if I take the firehouse, that we had a claim for the, for the house, and we absorbed $1,000 deductible.
Right.
If there was another claim, would it be a per claim deductible, or is it?
My
an
understanding
annual
is not an
deductible?
annual, but it's. My thought is.
That could be why they were zero, they put it in the general fund budget and not in the others, but
I thought it was per.
you might check that. It's
Right.
per occurrence, so we should have it.
I'm pretty sure it's per occurrence, but I'll double check that. The other expenditures, not a lot of changes. A slight increase in lab because, again, we were concerned about the issues of the testing requirements with our Class A biosolid and some of the costs. They're pushing and I'm not sure how far the state's gonna push some of these new PFAS and some of these other new types of concerns in the waste, how much testing they're gonna require additionally, and based on those testing regimens, what other types of treatment or other types of changes we might have to make. Right now, that hasn't really been proposed, but that's floating around. So that's reflected a little bit in that number. The biggest change you can see is on the RMI contract, obviously. So, we're no longer paying to all septic, as well as, that's just really their support to the Class A, some of the basic engineering. So that number, declines because you're not paying for the sludge hauling up to upstate to dispose of that. So that's the first.
We still have $15,000 budget. Is that a backup, just in
In
case?
case there's a problem where we have to haul.
Yeah.
Based on, you could have a catastrophic
That's what I figured.
concern, that's really just a placeholder number. And at some point, he does have to get a rag, some other things that are not in the actual, that don't go through the dryer. So stuff that he gets out of some of the grit that doesn't pass through the dryer. He does have to
Some.
dispose of that, so there's always some material that has to get all that. So on top of page 17. Again, there's a legal and financial, or legal in here, we've left it, we spent the money. I guess again, it's a placeholder kind of allocation. Yeah, it's less in water,
Mhm.
so we left that alone. He has slightly increased his IT because he might have to do some additional, if he's running the dryer around the clock, we might have to make some updates to our SCADA. We had made some improvements to it last year, but we might have to do some additional work, so that reflects a little bit of that cost in there. Repairs and maintenance. He did put in some additional money, if you notice, under sewer line flushing and maintenance. Just, I think, reflecting that he wants to do more of that work, which is really preventative, saves us from having to go out and deal with backups and other unpleasant problems. So that's money well spent, that 25,000.
So I do have a question back on
Yes.
professional services.
Yep.
The audit financial services is $37.50, but the water is $4,000. Should they be identical? It's supposed to be the same amount. Between the two parts.
Okay, let's see.
So that'd be page 12.
In this purchase, I don't think it would, but we can sort of change that.
Well, the percentage
Yeah,
are split.
It should be,
be
it should
identical.
be the same,
So
yeah.
that's 4,000, that's fine.
And I'm
Oh,
only saying,
I increase, right.
yeah,
I
so if it's
increased
4,000,
that,
it should be,
Yeah.
for one, it should be 4,000 for the next. is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
It's 15% of your estimated.
Forecast be there.
I say 15%, but I mean, do we pay for the village audit and the town pays for the town audit?
Yeah.
Probably. Okay, so it's, it's
This is 100%.
50, 25, 25.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Repairs and maintenance, you know, we talked about the line flushing, pump station operations are pretty consistent. Not a lot changes there. Buildings and plant, I think the biggest issue there is we slightly looked at our costs for the maintenance of the buildings themselves. And we budgeted 55, and you can see over the last couple of years, we've been over that in terms of actual, so we raised that number up to 60, just that more accurate spending. The same with electric, because again, we've been budgeting 50, we've been consistently above that number, so we changed that number as well. You can see a slight increase in overall in that whole section on the plan.
Especially with the dryer.
And the prior, as well. Yes.
Where in this would we be looking at, like what happens on, is it High Mill? We have the floods and all that, is there any plan? Is that all highway? That's nothing to do at all with that.
The only thing that, no, because the only thing that could come out of that is if we decide, if we can get some mitigation money so that they can somehow divert some of that flood water.
Mhm.
Then I think that's all outside of the sewer budget.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, and we're still working with the state on a 406 plan for that.
So
Not moving quickly.
we moved the SCADA up a bit because of what security issues and things like that.
Same reasons, yes. So he has a little more complicated system than they do at water. So this is a little more expensive. So there's a slight increase. I think the other thing that we look at is again, is chemicals. You know, we have not spent current year close to the budget on that, but I think we will be when it's all said and done. So we left a lot of that pretty consistent. Then back to, you can see then here on page 18, under equipment. We have the equipment purchase, which reflects the purchase of the dryer. So in the current fiscal year 22, so the question will be if we do add the revenue that we talked about, then that would be an offset. So you would see a decrease in that bottom line forecasted difference. And that's not reflected in it now. Same thing, we did not put in, we just put in an estimated payment for the first 5 payments for the fiscal year 23 budget. Again, if it goes forward and we don't have the offsets from efficiency per month, that'll just be an expense that you notice in the debt service schedule.
What about a reserve for the truck?
Well, that gets us down to project expenditures.
Oh, vehicle replacement, okay, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
all right,
yeah, down
I
there,
jumped the
yeah.
gun.
No, it's all right. We had the
Okay.
same conversation.
Same situation.
Same
Same
thing.
situation.
Same thing.
Same deal.
Pretty much proposing the same deal.
Okay,
So set the reserve up for 7 this year
Right.
and budget 17 next year.
Correct. And then with the offset of what the trade-in would be, that's enough to replace the vehicle. Then the other significant change that we looked at is contracted work under project expenditures, that 40,000. That would just be reflecting if we're going to do all of the design for any of the ARPA improvements to the materials handling. or the other improvements, that's where some of that expense will come from. So we just didn't know what else to put in there for now, so we left that in there, as well as if we have to hire a contractor for something. But we just sort of put that number in there as well, which is a little higher. Now, we'll see carrying it forward what's gonna be coming out of there. This year, we're not spending as much, so it's not been as high. And then we do have, we're not sure yet on other projects. We're gonna have to talk about, depending upon what happens with the Pleasant Valley Road. So here's what ends up happening. So you guys have seen, right, the pavement management system and the multiple years of projects that are going out. This year, not this year's budget, but the following year's budget is very heavily invested in the village. So there's a whole variety of village roads in that year for repaving. The issue there is a lot of those streets also have old clay tile for sewer. So if we were being responsible, if I'm tearing up the street to do major paving, it would only make sense at that point to try to do
Well, it's open.
sewer replacements. Well, I haven't put anything in there yet for that because I want to see what the bids come back for Pleasant Valley. Because if the paving bids are outrageous, we're going to have to really take a hard look at what our paving budgets are going forward. Because, you know, you guys all know the biggest cost in production of asphalt is that price of gasoline has a huge impact on the cost of what you're paying at the plant. And we're out to bid right now, so I don't have numbers. We forecasted an increase, but that was before this current surge in pricing. So we might end up not getting as much paving done as we had anticipated, and then we're gonna have to adjust, obviously, to figure out how we're gonna go forward. So those things are still to be determined.
But that could push our budget up if you get in there. If they get to do those projects in 2023, that money's not, we're not putting in for those projects
So
here and pushing up the taxes to do that.
So the point of it, we just don't have a handle on how that timing is going to work depending upon the prices. So we really have to see what comes in. Then we have to decide how much we potentially forecast to do in the following budget year. And then we'd have to talk at this level about what do we want to replace? Can we go out and try to find money to replace these things and do it all as one large project?
You know, this was a few years ago, right? Remember how, when you open the road, there's a time to get the stuff done, but the problem is now, the driver is not the village, the driver is the town.
Right.
Town's projects will drive the village projects.
Well, the real driver here is just the cost of paving.
I know, so, but there's no point, that's why to pay for ripping a road,
Is
brand
this-
new road up again.
Correct.
Jason
Is this Bellows Falls work planned for fiscal 23 or 24?
24.
Okay, so we got some
Correct.
time.
We have time, but I'm just saying those conversations are gonna start happening next year.
Okay, I kind
Trying
of,
to
I
lead
sort
up
of
to
like,
all of that.
okay.
Because there's a lot of old clay tile that, again, if we're doing major paving in the village, it just doesn't make sense. Not to fix it. While
What about water? Is the water lines, would they be?
they're in better shape in most places, but I'll have to check specifically on.
Of course, we've got a cushion there in the
Right,
water fund.
But not, sewer's different. Yeah.
right.
No, I think it obviously would require fairly significant rate increases to do it.
Right.
Or bonding, which scares me when I think about it.
Well, I mean, and if you bond it, you're gonna have to,
We got
Charge.
Pay for it. Yeah, right.
Right,
so,
those are out there. Yeah, we just didn't do anything with that in this current budget forecast, it was just too speculative. And,
Okay,
To
and we
do it
have
now,
one more year, we just have to prepare for it ahead of time.
we will have that conversation ongoing.
That might even have a consideration in the race in the fall, if, depending on
I
how
would
far
be-
along that's.
I will be coming back to you before I make a recommendation. That'll be in that mix as we talk about that. Because I think it's important to let the community know these are all factors, right? We're not making this stuff up. Old clay tile, it makes no sense to do.
Oh,
I think
and the pipe bursting some years ago, that was interesting project. Do you guys have any additional questions on it, or so work that wasn't over there, so I'm chair.
so we're gonna have one more go through the whole budget
Yes,
the next
so now we have sort of a few other cleanup items, and then we'll get an estimated tax rate, because we're close to getting our grand list finalized, and then we'll get all that out to you with all these changes, and then we'll see if you want to do either have a meeting, a special meeting, or bring it forward for the conversation at your next meeting. So it won't be, like I said, right now we're forecasting a slightly decreased rate. On the tax rate.
I would like to cover an item that is not in water and sewer, that's in the general budget, and that is based upon the letter that I got last week that we all looked at. About the village clerk.
Yep.
And my reason for bringing that up is because it's a position that is being done by the town clerk, who looks at all the election material that we have to do and all of the other things, and I have a handwritten list here, we're getting for nothing because the town's clerk is doing the village work. But say, for instance, the village clerk was not the town clerk. Then we'd have to pay for somebody to do all of that work, running the election, but would not be done by the town clerk. And
Is that under elections or is that under village clerk? Because village clerk, I think, is the note taker.
yes, but the work still has to be done by the same person.
Right, oh,
We
yeah.
pay for elections, but that's materials. That's really materials and anyone who runs the poll, who works at the polls.
Right.
That's what covers that. It doesn't cover the hours covered by the village clerk, it covers the other things. So, and not including the minutes that get done at these meetings. And the number that we have in there has not moved for at least a decade.
Mhm.
And that's my time in office. So, and I'm sure that Stefan could go back even further, perhaps, maybe wait and say it's probably been that way forever. And I'm simply saying that if it wasn't the person who's doing the stuff for free, and I want us to look at that clearly, we are getting a lot of village work done by the town clerk as the village clerk, that we need to consider moving it forward into the 21st century. It could be someone else. If this person doesn't run for office again, that elected position needs to be filled by someone, and $3,000 isn't gonna cut it, John. That's what I'm trying to say. So we have to come back in April, and I want us to deeply consider, and I'm gonna type up this handwritten list and send it to everybody, so you get an idea about what's actually getting done by the town clerk. Okay? For us to think about it.
Is that anything we could just deal with right now?
We can, but
Well,
although it's technically not on our agenda, we have water and sewer, but I want us to seriously question it next meeting.
My question, yeah, I think next meeting, but I think here's the question I would ask you to consider if you're considering this, is if you had a village clerk that was different than the town clerk,
Uh-huh,
okay? The election-related work,
mhm.
okay? How would a village clerk, who could be anybody in the town or out of town,
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a resident.
how would they do that work? I mean, I think to me, that work needs to be done at the town clerk's office.
Where all the materials are, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if you can't, I think it's two different things. I think it's, do we need to make a payment to the town clerk's office for services?
Mhm.
If so, I think I'd rather look at it that way, making sure that we're covered in the event that you had two different
Right,
people,
right.
okay?
I get it.
So I think we've got to look at the two different things.
Right, but if we did that, it would still be in the village clerk's line,
Right.
and you would just forward a check to the town, who would want to pay the town clerk if it's the same person, or not if it's not.
Right, it would be a payment to the town clerk. It wouldn't be a payment to the village clerk.
Right, but for instance, the village treasurer doesn't work in the building. She used to, she's retired, it's an elected position, and she gets paid, not a lot, it's less than $3,000 a year, to come in and do whatever the town treasurer needs to do on an annual basis. Yeah, nobody hand signs checks anymore, right? It's all stamped by a printer, and then you run the stock through the printer. But she still has to do some technical things required, but she's not a town or village employee anymore.
Right, so it's-
And
her
doing, and
work
she still has to
doesn't
come,
require-
some of it has to be in here, but an election, like you're right, does require a lot more technical need that is in the, already within the municipality, in the town hall.
Right.
But it is a possibility that some year their village clerk will not be with the town clerk.
So I think we gotta keep it separate. I think we have to keep it separate, and I think we have to look at,
Like a separate
town
line.
clerk services for elections
Uh-huh,
as an item, and
yes,
The
we get
note
paid
taker
to
for
the
our
town
meetings.
because, yeah,
Right.
the person who has
So
the
I-
technical expertise is the town.
I'm not trying to avoid the.
No, you just, you're
I'm just saying, we need to keep it.
moving it around, so basically makes it separate, but still, whoever's doing, it's not about the person doing the position, so that the position gets done.
Exactly, we gotta be
Okay,
sure.
so that's for next, unless you have any other comments on that, that's our next meeting.
You said you're gonna send us something?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of handwritten notes on the items being done during elections and minutes being taken by the village clerk. And I will type them up and send them up in an email, so that we can all.
I've got other comments on the general fund. We're gonna-
And we'll have a lot of that next meeting, that's what we figured, right? So,
Yeah,
okay,
let us clean up this draft and get it back to you. And
Okay.
then if you do have stuff that you want us to include, it helps because we're gonna start looking at it sort of comprehensively, so.
when do we have to final say? What's that date? Before it goes to print.
I think I have to have the draft of the village report out to that person. So we meet again, I was just looking at this, trying to figure this out. while we were talking.
April 12th,
April 12th, and I think,
That's it.
is that the
Right.
last date?
but I think for her to print the village report in order for us to have the meeting on the,
The May date, yeah.
right. I think she had to have it by like the 20th or something.
So is there a possibility we may or may not, I mean, I don't know how we feel about how confident we feel about the budget, that we may have it done, we may be able to make finals on the 12th, or we have to have an additional meeting like a Saturday or something.
Well, if you send us everything, we'll clean up what we have here. We'll send it out to you. If I can get all your feedback from next week, then we can send you out a
Final plan.
cleaned up, right, comments with all of your updates as well as our updates.
Well, that would mean individual trustees would be sending their recommendations to you, but that doesn't mean all the that means that I make recommendations and each of
Right.
them make recommendations. It doesn't mean I agree with theirs or they agree with mine. So how do we do that? See what I'm saying? They say raise it, I say lower it. We all come, and somebody else says this or that, and that, we have to do that in the meeting, we can't, I don't necessarily think you're going to get, that information via email, that's not gonna work that way. You're still gonna do it.
So you can send out the cleaned up and then.
Yeah, then we'll just go
Send out the
there on the
cleaned up.
top.
See where we are,
Comments that we
so.
say, what can we all-
Yeah, I don't
They
think,
may come to us when they say it's great,
yeah,
in which case we don't.
and then we don't meet, otherwise we meet on the 12th, we can find it. I don't think we feel we have any significant issues
I think
with the
once
budget
it's
as
in-
it is right now,
I think once it's in hand, then we can,
like tweak it,
2
basically.
days to look this over
Mhm.
and then get back to us whether we need to be there.
Okay, I think that will work.
That'd be great.
Okay, I got some comment from someone telling me it's really a dull meeting, but whatever.
What?
It's gotta be.
So much fun.
So there's nothing inflammatory enough here.
Oh, my
Okay,
goodness.
item number 3, thank you. Oh, good night.
Thank you, Melissa.
Discussion of the declaration of inclusion.
So this came, and there's some backup material here as well for this, and this is something that has been going through a variety of communities in the state, and I think their goal is to try to come up with a larger proclamation that then would go to the governor and create some. I think it's just momentum and publicity about how communities feel about that particular item. There is nothing in relationship to the declaration itself that would be in conflict with any of your current, you have USC policies, you have non-discriminatory language. It's just really, I think, more of a reinforcement of that ideal. And just wanted to.
But it's like, who is,
This came from,
what is the sponsor?
Amy, okay, Amy Howard sent us this one, I believe. She sent it to Scott.
Right.
She introduced the idea. The state, let's see, was it last year? Or, yeah, last year, Phil Scott did a declaration, proclamation of inclusion. And I printed it so I could read what his was. A number of communities in the state are doing this. And it's supposed to come to us at the tri-board meeting on the 29th. Was it the 29th?
Yes.
Of this month, between the town has this already too?
So there's one for the select board, I just made up one.
Yeah,
here.
One for us and one for the village of Saxon River. And we'll be discussing it, they're discussing it at their individual meetings, and we'll be discussing it at our joint board meeting.
Right. It doesn't,
Next week.
it doesn't bind you to any specific activity. There's no specific,
Yeah, but it's like, the thing of it is that I know we have an inclusive village government, we have an inclusive school governance. I mean, it came up at our meeting, our school board meeting last night. You know, when somebody floats something, and, you know, if this was from the governor's office asking us to do something like this to establish the state, but I just, you know, when there's no sponsor, other than, you know, it just, I don't know. I don't like to sign things that don't have a sign. I mean, I don't know, what's the purpose? You know, we're already those things. Why do you have to?
It's an
Declaration.
affirmation, and I know, because I looked at it and thought, yes, I'm part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion group, this VLCT, and I understand this, but at the same time, some of the language indicates it's sort of a slap in the face that you weren't doing this before. I mean, we were already an inclusive community, and it may have,
That's wonderful.
I didn't put this forth, Amy Howard did, and asked that we consider it at the tri-board meeting. And so we're getting our first look at it in our packets. We can change the language, and each individual municipality can do that if they wish to pass it. This is our first look at it, and it'll be brought back next week.
Well, I think you gotta have some information on sponsorship, because
So, you know, if you're going, I hear you, Jim. I'm along the same lines. I'd be more apt to do something that mimics what the governor has than otherwise.
yeah, I mean, you know, if we were asked to, you know, by the state government to do an affirmation of inclusion,
We would, yeah.
I'd be more considerate.
Well, I would say Amy Howard was the introducer, so she'd be the person you want to speak to, and she'll be with us next week.
and this will be back on that agenda.
Right, and did this already come, I didn't stay on the select board meeting last week, did they already look at this last week?
They did,
Okay,
yes.
they didn't pass it though, they didn't do.
No, I just said that it's just there for informational
Right.
purposes. It'll be coming back to you
Next week, yeah,
on the 29th.
okay. All right, so, anyone else have anything else on that subject? We'll see it again. Okay, no, thank you, but it was not.
It sounded like that.
Well, I knew she was on that committee with the lead of the LCT, so I thought that.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a meeting yesterday and I couldn't stay, and I sent them a text letting them know that I couldn't stay because I just got a call from my son telling me somebody got hit by a car, so I had to leave. So I did tell them that we were looking at this on the 29th, thanks, you know, just trying to bring us up to speed. Some people don't feel included,
Right.
you know, some sexes don't feel included. And so they want some language that makes them feel included. Let's see, review existing solar credit contracts. And I asked Scott to make sure we have these because you've been speaking a couple different times about doing active solar instead of passive solar be in violation or conflict with the contracts we have. So
And I think it clearly is. I
there's
think
only one
committed-
section that actually points to that.
we've committed the power that we consume to these two benches. And I mean, I don't see how you can build a field. I don't know, I mean, just,
Look at page six.
well, anyway,
Covenants.
I'm not gonna, I can't speak to
It
the
speaks-
legality, but it
Well,
says,
that was it. I wanted to make sure that we could do this. It will reduce the amount of electricity, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate all the electricity.
Page 6B.
Page 6C specifically, utility. With that, it
is
says
this in both contracts?
in both contracts,
Well, it says B, the one above there too kind of talks about it.
yep. The customer shall not enter into, it's not, but we aren't gonna be doing a group net metering arrangement with any other person. We're talking about doing our own.
Our own, yeah.
So that would be, a thought, it's a project idea. But C says, the customer shall not take any action to cause any customer meter to be disconnected or removed from the utility service without obtaining system owner's prior written consent, which shall not be unreasonably withheld if the customer designates one or more replacement meters on the same rate schedule. So we have options, and we have to get their permission. I can't imagine that moving forward by reducing our carbon footprint is gonna piss them off. It will financially have an impact, but we'll have to figure out how we work it out. Because especially if you're talking about solar on wastewater or solar on the water
Well, I
department,
think,
especially wastewater.
I guess the issue is what, well, I guess we need the lawyer to look at the agreement. and
Yeah.
say, can you
I
build
think
a,
so.
Yeah.
a solar or not?
And
My
that's-
feeling, my reading of this would say, we would be in violation of this agreement.
But I certainly wouldn't spend any legal money until we know for sure we're actually doing something. We
Right.
aren't there
That's what I
yet.
was gonna say.
Yeah. We're not there yet. I'm just saying that
More of
is,
a background.
yeah, it's background information for the future.
And that's what your current programs are, if there's any question.
Exactly.
Your
You know
current
exactly what they
discount.
are.
Correct.
Number 5 is to discuss the Australian ballot issues and warning. Oh, yeah, the whole problem with the town. has.
So- I did send that off to, the Secretary of State's office. I've not heard back from them yet, so when I do, I will let you know. But based on, I did have a copy of the warning, and then based on the discussion of the same issue from the same time period from the town side, it would certainly appear that it would make sense that you would possibly do something. But the town board did to adopt it by resolution
Mhm.
for your money articles, just so that you have that item.
Yeah.
I thought we had done this.
No, we did. No, we did. But however, the problem is that they're saying now that we can't, that if your vote has been done on the floor, in order to change it to Australian ballot, you must do the vote for that on the floor. We put it, we did it in Australian, we did it by Australian ballot. It was,
I thought we got a permission at a village meeting to put it on the
ballot,
ballot,
and we did,
and then it had to pass the ballot, which it passed.
but it passed by Australian ballot. And the problem is, they're now saying that you have to do it from the floor and you
Guidance
start it on the floor.
from the Secretary of
Even
State.
if you've already, so you're not like grandfathered or anything, you've got to go back and.
So, yes, the possibility is we still have to redo it on the floor, which by that would indicate we have to have a floor vote this year in order to.
And that's what we're waiting to find out.
That's what we're waiting to hear.
That's what I'm trying to get clear guidance.
And we know that Zoomers can't vote.
And you know what, and I find that a violation of their rights, and I'd start a suit if it was me who was on Zoom and wasn't allowed, and was told at the moment in the meeting that you were not allowed to vote
Right.
on an item.
Yeah, no,
It just seemed wrong, but that's what they said.
I think a lot of that emergency legislation didn't take into account a lot of those factors. And I think unfortunately, it was either vague or non-specific to a lot of those concerns, and now it's turning.
You get a,
and I think that, go ahead.
you get a legitimate modified vote of the people. I'd say, let it go, and if somebody wants to take us to court on it, see how far it gets.
I agree with you. I agree with Stefan. I think
Yeah.
We've done it. We've taken it to the.
But we're not the only ones that have done it. You had a select board that did it. I'm sure if we look,
I
we
think
can
most
find
of the
other
places
places.
across the state probably
Exactly.
follow the same protocol.
They probably did, but they gotta tell us that we have to back up and we can't do it on Australia ballot year after year because we passed it. Because we did ours in 2020. They did theirs in 2021 and so we figured we'd be good.
So if
We
they say,
specifically asked to.
Right.
To, from henceforth, to do these by Australian ballot.
and so and say, then that, if not allowed, invalidates anything
Yeah, you're
previous.
telling the voters that their
Right.
votes don't count.
So I think if you went to court, reasonable and usual and customary, a judge would say, if that was what was the will of the people, that would rule. But maybe, like I say, wait for somebody to
Tell
take us to
tell
court.
the state not to make it any harder than it is. In any case, we just have to wait for the.
I'm trying to get some guidance, so I can
Yeah.
tell you, right.
Yeah, what their final say, their decree is, whatever.
Because it's not clear to me,
Yeah,
to be real honest with you.
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of municipalities that didn't do what we did, which was
Right.
take it to the voters
Yeah,
and have it passed.
I agree. Anyway, so that's what
okay,
that was.
all right,
Just
and
wanted
we'll have to make decisions on April 12th,
Well,
basically.
once we're approved, we'll go storm the state house.
That's right.
Just like when we took the Bellows Bridge back.
Yeah.
It worked for you, right? You and the crew, right?
So we've got several items, or we've already talked about for, to review the agenda items for next meeting on April
I'm
12th.
radical today.
And that's okay. Review agenda items for the joint board meeting, actually now it's a tri-board meeting.
Right. So we're gonna have the ARPA update on the ARPA discussions. We're gonna have the first, a listing of our current, tax
Yep.
sale.
That's right.
We're going to have a, follow-up discussion, and not anything more than a preliminary discussion about 66 Atkinson.
Mhm.
And we're going to have, what's the other thing? Oh, the declaration of conclusion.
Declaration of conclusion, and they might need some information. The ARPA committee is meeting Monday, 9:30 to 10:30. That's what it is. And so may have some more solid information. We've got, as a matter of fact, ARPA, want to make sure people know that ARPA project submission is closes after tomorrow. So if you've got any brilliant ideas, you can send them to Gary, or you can fill out their Google form. Today, tomorrow's the last day. So,
Right, so
for ideas for.
we'll have an idea about maybe appropriate
What?
for in other business, or should I?
No, you can bring that up in other business, so we'll get down to that just a second.
Sure.
Review and approve the orders, bills, and warrants.
Move approval.
Need a second?
Seconded.
Need to speak louder. See your lips moving.
I don't sit on my work. No, it's fine. I'll be a gentleman and yield to my colleague.
Oh,
It's recorded for history.
That's
Let's
right,
go out.
yeah. Yeah, but the owl doesn't see your lips move. Just saying. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, other business, Scott.
No.
Wade,
No.
Chase.
No.
I'm good.
Okay, I got 2 items. We talked about that 66 Atkinson Street. We have a substantial investment there. I'm under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, that with some of the monies that we had spent there for what we had to do, there was liens placed.
Right, yep.
So in the event something happens with this property via the town, what do we look to gain back out of our
Town
expenses?
owns the property now, so
Correct.
Right,
what happens to our liens?
Well, the assumption would be, another piece, part of what we talked about is, what's the current public investment on the properties? Town and village both have money in the
Okay,
property. I think.
alright.
Yeah.
You had some legal fees, I think you had a $5,000, it's like the town, the
The
village is into
village,
it.
I think we had about 16,000.
I remember it being.
Does that include taxes? No.
It was about 18,000,
Okay.
I think, when it was all said and done.
Okay.
The balances with the village, with the town, with the demolition and some other expenses, so I think we were close to that 80, somewhat 85,000 roughly in public investment. That's all
Okay,
said and done.
wow. Yeah.
So. And my understanding from both boards is that they would like to see that money returned, right? They'd like to get
Mhm.
made whole, as well as the philosophy has been, and that's part of what we're gonna talk about next week, is does it make sense to be a not-for-profit use, which means it doesn't go on the tax rolls?
Right.
We don't recoup the losses, well, we might recoup the losses, but
So
But no
those are,
going
those are
forward.
some of the broader parameters.
Well, you know, one of the things that, in looking ahead to next week's meeting is to discuss this topic was, I'd be interested in what the setback,
There's a lot of zoning
setback,
issues with that property.
yeah,
Yeah, there are.
because I think not only for our benefit, but for the public that has expressed
general
interest.
knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, because it is a difficult lot, and,
Yeah.
you know, we always had problems with snow coming off the roof of the window, we had to close
Horrible
that.
every,
You know,
every
had to
year.
close
yeah.
that thing, well, obviously,
Yeah.
we, you know, that in itself.
Yeah.
Sets up a bigger side variance or whatever, but
Yeah.
I also know that our building director, or whoever, Chuck, has interpreted the setback things fairly
Differently.
liberally. So I think it's
Yeah,
important.
he has adjusted, yeah, the here to here, and I'm trying to remember, I can't remember, I think it's less than 10, 12 feet. Because I'm thinking about a piece of property that's on Green Street where that's concerned,
Oh, yeah.
or where things,
He
you know
said
what I
8
mean?
feet or something.
Yeah,
It's
something like
terrible.
8
I
feet
mean,
range, so
but
that's not very far back,
that would
but,
be, I know when we put up our garage.
Yeah.
We had to be 15 feet from
Yeah, yeah.
from the road for the side variance. And that's just Hadley Street
Yes.
with no snow coming down, but I think that lot in particular, I think has some.
it's gonna limit, yeah, what can be done in
It's
it.
got some constraints on it, for sure.
You had a second topic.
Yeah, my second topic was on some real estate. And it's, I'd like to mention it for the ARPA fund idea. And I, being somewhat on the town plan, I know, well, I had two ideas in mind. And it's something that works for the whole community, in my opinion, something that the community can, everybody in the community can use. And it's something that a lot of other, or some communities have that we don't have. And that's, specifically here in the village, we don't have a village common. You know, like a green space with a gazebo, where you could have a farmer's market,
Fireman's.
live concerts.
Fireman's.
Well, I'm talking, you know, like a nice, large, not that that's not nice or anything, but I'm talking where you can have public events, a spot that's owned by the community, say the village.
Like
And-
Eddie Green Park.
Well, I'm talking about a green, just a green, you know, nice strip of grass. Robinson Paper Mill, the old site comes to mind. And the town plan doesn't have that, has other plans for that. But I remember at one point,
Who's the
there
other
was
one?
$200,000 or $300,000 talked about for purchasing. Well, you can have concerts there, you could have a carnival there, which they used to have. It could be like our version of a barber's park. We have these funds that are available. I mean, you could buy a block of real estate here on one of the streets close to the square. And from the grand list aspect, you could level some of it, and we could have a common where, you know, you could have public events, public gatherings, etc. You can laugh at it,
You
but
know,
I mean,
I know
it's,
you're very sincere.
I've sat here a couple of times and not to take a swing at anybody. And I've heard some figures on a piece of property on the island, you know, 200,000, 300,000. Good luck. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Oh, no, you never did.
You know, so, you know, if there's one property that I have in mind, there's some monies that came from the revolving loan fund. That's kind of why I asked about the FADC earlier. If we were to do something as a village board for a village common, that's a nice site in my opinion. I know it differs from what the idea of the town plan is, but if we were to spend some monies like that, it gives the town an opportunity, or gives whoever owns whatever property, and the town for an opportunity to get some of the money back.
Well, I think you should write these up and send them in by tomorrow.
By tomorrow.
I was gonna say, you gotta have them out at Sutton's Meadow.
Yep, and I think Gary will still take ours through an
Well,
email,
I
so.
consider this my idea, and
But you gotta write it
Yeah,
up.
but
It's
you gotta
gotta-
write it
Yes,
down.
yeah, one
Well, I can
Wi-Fi
type it
last.
briefly and send it to the manager
Okay.
between now and
If
midnight.
you send me an email, I'll get it in.
Or
Yeah.
Eric.
But you think about it, what brings a lot of people together, you know? I've been recently up to, one place in Connecticut and one place up the road a ways from here. And, they have there's two beautiful commons, they have a gazebo, they have a lot of public functions. People, it attracts people to your community that will spend money in other venues or other places. It's just a thought, you know, laugh at it now, but give us some
No,
thought.
We're not laughing.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have laughed.
Well, no, it's, you know,
The,
I go to a lot of communities that have exactly what you're talking about.
Sure, I mean-
just, you know, I mean, we kind of have a smaller version of them,
Yeah, it's a much smaller version.
you know.
well, we used to
Here and
have
over there, but-
farmer's market at the Hetty
Hetty Green, and now it's down in the
Now
Wakeford
it's
Center.
down, we have the Waypoint Center area
Yeah,
there, we have the Fireman's Memorial now, I think.
I mean, I look at what the historical
In
society is
fact, I've
doing.
been to concerts at the Waypoint Center.
Sure. I mean,
oh yeah, the trail
yeah,
down.
the trail and, you get the green space that they've created down
Yeah.
there. And that looks good. It brings people together. It
Yeah,
has,
it's
it has the
great.
potential to grow.
Mhm.
It's just a thought.
Oh, good, good thought. And you- yeah, yeah.
I'll type it up and send it in.
Yeah.
I was gonna mouth that. You were my response.
Okay, we have no need for an executive session. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second,
I'll second it.
not afraid to look over. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.